Hello, this is Dan Humberg. The video you're watching is an instructional video or an aid to individuals that are installing a tin kit for a Firestop system on a combine. In this case, the tin is for the Case Model 8010 combine, and in particular, the earlier years of the 8010 when they used a wastegate actuator on the turbocharger. That system requires a different design of tin than the later ones that I initially designed the tin to fit. I didn't realize that early version existed or was different, and so the tin that was initially shipped for those kits didn't fit to enclose the wastegate actuator and the wastegate turbo on it. Also, they moved the turbocharger and the exhaust pipe out a little bit on the later ones from those earlier ones, and so there's a mismatch there in terms of a dimension as well. So this is actually the views of the CAD file, the computer-aided design file, or assembly of the tin on the 8010 early years of the 8010, and we're going to step through the different pieces of tin here to help you understand how it goes together, and I'll show you a couple things that you need to do to complete that installation that might not be obvious otherwise. I can rotate the view so that you can look at the tin kit in different dimensions or different viewpoints. This would be looking down on the top. Where my cursor is up here is where the engine would be, and we're bolted onto the side around the exhaust manifold. The manifold would be inside the part that's outlined there. The exhaust turbine will fit inside this larger box here that's highlighted. And then the exhaust pipe comes out here and it makes an upward bend before it dumps out at the muffler up on the right hand end here. So that's the general orientation of our enclosure. I will point out that there are a few pieces here that are common to all of the 8010s and the 8120s. The exhaust manifold along the block here was common to all of those, and so the tin pieces are the same for all of those. The three pieces that you'd begin with that are the same regardless of which kit you're working with probably are this top piece here, light blue outlined there, and the two pieces that make up the bottom underneath the manifold here. The top piece has a flange that has, see if I can get it oriented so you can see that. Top piece has a flange bent up and is oriented with so that these holes line up with open tapped holes in the block above the manifold, and we can use I believe it's an 8mm bolt in these to hold it on to the block. Underneath, let's look at this from the, it doesn't really show it on here. These two pieces on the bottom will have, when you receive them, will have tabs that stick out to the back here, and some of the tabs you actually bend down 90 degrees and some of the tabs you leave poking straight back. The video that shows how to bend the tin set for this model will show that, and the tabs that remain going straight towards the block actually sit on top of a casting boss. It's a sand cast piece of the block that runs the length of it here, and so they rest on top of that. And although they're not shown, the pieces aren't shown in this one, there's a bracket that'll go on the bottom here that will screw on that, or bolt held on with screws, that will overlap a tapped hole down here, and we can use an 8mm bolt to hold that one on, and holds the bottom of the enclosure to the block. Similarly, the four holes over here on the right are the holes for attaching another bracket piece, tin bracket piece that's shown in the tin assembly, that extends down here a little farther, but also has a slotted hole that covers or will overlap a open tapped hole in the block, and so it's a way to assemble the bottom part of the tin to the engine block itself. There's there's an artifact of something that's not actually in the kit. I'm not sure where that came from here, but don't worry about it. That's just a computer glitch, I think. Then we have the pieces that cover the manifold outer part here. We can zoom in on the left side one. It's highlighted in gold here. That piece will overlap the upper piece here. It actually shows it the other way around, but it should fit over the top of that this one. I think again I've got a part here that's selected from, there's some mismatch in my selection of parts here, but don't worry about it. What you get will fit. This gray piece will fit over the top of this flange and wrap around here, and there will be screw holes that match up to attach it over the top here. Similarly, there'll be screw holes to attach it to the flange that sticks up from the bottom piece here. Same arrangement on the right hand side of the manifold. It's a little bit longer piece under here, overlaps the first one, and there's a place for a couple of screw holes, screws to go through here to attach the two together, that one, and I think one up farther back there. Maybe I can get rid of this part. No, I guess I can't in this case. Well, we won't worry about that. Anyway, they overlap there, and there's a couple screw holes to attach them to each other, but also there are flanges there that stick up so that we can screw the cover piece here on this side through these screw holes, and also onto the top piece here. And this gray one should overlap the blue one instead of the other way around. When you get it, that should be the case. So those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces go together. I'm not sure what they're numbered. I think the 1, 2, and 3 are part of the numbering for those, but these cup block or these manifold cover plates out here actually have higher part numbers, but that doesn't really matter. Anyway, you can assemble those 5 pieces to cover most of the manifold as the beginning part of your assembly if you'd like. Those can go on the engine pretty easily. In fact, I think you could probably put the manifold covers onto this top piece and screw them on there, and then put those 3 pieces, slip that whole assembly down over the top of the manifold, and then have to mate up with the pieces from underneath. And then you have to put screws, and some of these screws may be hard to reach. You may have to reach under with the little stubby screwdriver that's provided with the kit in order to be able to reach and get those. And I'm not sure if you can get every one of these, because the air line entering the turbo compressor actually is in here, and it really kind of blocks some of that area or makes it tight, but you may be able to get all of those in. A little easier to get them in on the other side, but you'd have to reach underneath and get to some of these as well. So those are the first few pieces that cover the manifold, and that will be the same whether it's a early 8010 or a late 8010 or even an 8120. Then we come to the pieces that make the early 8010 a little bit unique, and that's this box that encloses the exhaust turbine. That part, or that thing, is made up of a left side here that's in this case 3 pieces, and a right side that is 2 pieces down here and up here, and then 2 pieces in this case, that piece underneath, and this other large piece that wraps all the way around the rest of it. And we'll start with the left side. This is the piece that I think in the video, when I'm doing the bench assembly of the tin, this is the piece here. That's piece number 4, I believe, and that is the first one I'd probably work with. It has flanges on the top and the forward end, and then one flange that bends out to the left side here. It also has a cut in it from bottom up, and then this opening for your turbocharger oil pressure line. That line will angle through here and then come back to the turbocharger bearing. It comes out at an angle and then dives straight down out of once it's out of this hole or out of this slot. Notice that there are some openings or little slits around the edge of this so that you kind of have pedals. I explained that in the tin assembly, but in this case I think you'd bend some of these pedals on this forward part back in just a little bit to kind of parallel the oil line as it angles through here, and I'd bend some of these back ones forward a little bit to parallel that line as it comes through there, and these on the top and bottom you can bend out in order to accommodate that oil line. You also, in case that line is moved a little bit on your machine, this allows you to shift this hole just a little bit by bending these things. But the whole idea of these pedals, or part of the idea of these little pedals, is that you can bend them so that you have a smooth face of tin near that oil line. I really don't like the hard, sharp edge of this galvanized steel that's cut with a laser having any chance of making contact with the oil line. And we really want a little bit of clearance all around there, but I've also, in case it should shift and make contact with it, I'd rather it be a blunt side face of one of these than the actual hard edge that of the thin tin. Don't want to abrade that line and take any chance on losing your engine oil through that since that is engine oil that's running the turbocharger or lubricating the turbocharger bearing. So there's that one. Once you do run that line through there and you get this all assembled, I would use some of the aluminum foil tape that's provided with your kit to button this hole up tight. I would put tape around it and over the top and around, whatever, wrap it around that oil line, stick it on it'll form, fit, and then adhere as well. So I would put that on to try to prevent any dust that's coming at this from the left side here, the radiator fan, from being able to blast in there, because right behind there is the turbocharger compressor or exhaust turbine, and that's about the hottest spot on the whole machine. So button this spot up if possible. So that's the first piece shown outlined there. The second piece that will mate to it is this one. This would be 4. This would be part 5. Part 5 has a tab here and a tab here, or a flange here and here, and they are bent, each one at about a 45-degree angle to the previous one. This one bends over 45, and then this little one on top another 45. That's so that they can get out from under a bracket that supports the wastegate actuator there. So you'll have to bend those ahead of time. Then you can slip this piece. You'll see that, let's see, now you can see that there's kind of a weird notch up here cut in that piece on the outline of it, and you can rotate it and slip it underneath the actuator rod that's part of your wastegate actuator that shoots through here at an angle, and you can slip that under there, rotate this piece in place, and then there are screw holes. There's one here. There's that may be your only one to start with. To put, in fact, you may not want to put that screw in just yet, but when you put it together, you put these two pieces together in this configuration, and then this other one that's highlighted there is actually piece number 7, I think. Let's zoom in on that. Piece number 7 will overlay both those previous pieces, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screw holes in it. You should be able to shoot screws through from the left side, this one, this one, this one, and this one. You may need to shoot this one through from the right-hand side because the turbocharger compressor may block this from the left side, so that you can't do it. But between those 3 pieces, we should actually surround the rod, that actuator rod that goes through this space in this opening right through here. The opening is made up of this piece. You see the partial outline of a slot. This piece is the other side of that slot, and then this slot is perpendicular so that they kind of close in around that actuator rod. Now if you put it on and that actuator rod wants to rub on these edges or it doesn't fit there, you can trim any of these 3 pieces to allow that actuator rod to come through wherever it needs to come through. It may also do a little bit of sideways movement as it moves out and actuates the turbocharger wastegate. So make sure that again that has clearance. But then you can screw these pieces together on the machine, and then once they're on there, you can also tape this area up. I wouldn't tape it tight because you don't want something restricting that actuator from moving, but you can reduce the space around it to a very minimum with that tape, if there is any gap around there when we get done with those 3 pieces. So those are 3 pieces that make up what I'd call the upper left side of the turbocharger, and they're the bottom of those 3 pieces. These makes a kind of a semicircle here that fits right over the turbocharger bearing. It should have some clearance around that bearing, but fit not too far off. If for some reason it doesn't fit and you need to trim it, that's okay. You trim out here, but don't trim any more than you need to make it reliably fit there. Once those 3 pieces are where they fit together, or they'll fit together the way I just explained, but then this flange on the first one should butt up against the outside of the manifold cover, and at that point you could put a screw through here and hit this flange. You could put another one through here and hit that same flange, and I think this bottom one will hit the face of this. There should be a matching hole in this gray piece for that one as well, so you could hook this whole works on here to this manifold cover with those 3 screw holes. With those in place, you can go to the next piece underneath here. That's the bottom left side exhaust turbine cover outlined there. It has a flange that bends out to the left here, and then a flange on that one that bends underneath. And then it has, I think, 2 long flanges, one here, one here and a couple of little bitty flanges there. The one on here has a 45-degree bend and then another 45-degree bend to get it to a total of 90. Again, there's some aspect, I forget what it is here, that requires that. There's a clearance issue here, and so I had to have that bent 45 to kind of slip out from under that and get over around the outside of the exhaust turbine here. So hopefully that will fit all right. That piece will slide up in place. It doesn't show it on this, and so there may not be holes in the pieces that you get. You should be able to, I think that there's a screw hole behind this blue piece in the take it back, there isn't. These just fit together at that point. No, there is I take it back. The blue piece extends up behind here. So we have a screw hole here. I don't see a matching screw hole in the blue piece, which means I maybe didn't get that cut in the CAD model. So there wouldn't be a piece if you get one unless I've repaired that CAD model. There may not be a hole in the dark blue piece here to match to this one and the gray one. You can always slip it in place, mark that with a Sharpie or something like that, and then punch that hole or drill that hole to allow the screw to bite in there. If it's the smaller hole, which in this case you'd want the smaller hole, pilot hole, it would be about 1/8 of an inch diameter, or even a little smaller than that. The screws will cut out the rest of that hole. They're a self-drilling tapping screw. And in this case, that screw is meant to go through from the left side here, from the outside in. Now you've got a compressor that's right here, and so it's going to occlude some of this space, but with a long driver bit you can reach in and hit that hole and screw it through from the left side to the right. Out here we have these again overlap so that the blue one is underneath the gray one here, and we have a hole here. That's the pilot hole, indicating this screw is going to come through from the right to the left in this case, and hopefully there's enough space behind it here so that we don't run into the compressor with that screw. But that screw would come from your right to the left and actually poke from the inside of the enclosure to the outside. Most of the other screws shoot from the outside to the inside of the enclosure. So if you get that screwed on, or the other screws that attach this blue piece to the manifold cover right here, that screw hole looks like it's the single one that will actually latch this one onto this left side manifold cover. This flange under here covers up a gap in the bottom. That's an artifact of the later 8010 or 8120 kits, and I used the same pieces for some of that, so that just covers up that gap. So that's the left side of the exhaust turbine. We can come around here once those are in place. You can come onto the right side, and I would probably put on this lower piece first, the one that's highlighted there. It has flanges that bend right to left underneath here, so that there are places for all the screws to go in around there, and it has two screw holes up in the forward part of this forward flange that's bent out in order to butt up against the manifold cover and screw in here and here. And then there is a screw hole here and a couple back here that will attach it. It'll eventually attach it to the orange kind of piece above it. You can slip that piece up from the bottom and butt it up against the manifold cover in front and attach it with these two screws there to start. Once that's in place, oh, and I don't know if it's obvious, but let's get it to where we can see it. Here's that piece. You can see that it has a semicircular cutout here, and that will wrap underneath the exhaust pipe where the exhaust pipe is narrowest. It's about 3.5 inches, and it should fit around that. There should be enough clearance, but it should fit around that. If you need to trim it, you can, but you shouldn't have to if the measurements are correct and they made the machines consistently. After that piece goes on, we come to the top here, this brick red or orange piece. It has a flange that's bent out to the right to butt up against the manifold cover. It has flanges all around, up on top and around this way, that bend to the left or away from this face, that are for attachment of this cap. And then there's a flange that bends out to the right here that will fit on the top of the manifold cover as well. That one overlaps the outside of the lighter blue or blue-gray piece down underneath here. So you can slip it on from the top. It should, again, you see the cutout where the where the exhaust pipe goes through down here. It should slip down over that, and the holes should line up, and you can screw it together from right to left or outside to inside here with one screw here, another one there, and another one in here. So now if we get that much on, we've got the left and the right side of the exhaust turbine covered. Then we can come around to this gold piece underneath. Ignore the gray thing sticking through here. That's a computer an issue. It's irrelevant. It won't be there on your kit. So this gold piece has a wide flange that fits underneath the manifold cover. Then it's bent. The piece bends down just a little bit, and then it has a flat flange again underneath the forward part of it that all will fit up against the side covers on the exhaust turbine. There's a partial cutout here to fit around the oil return line from the turbocharger bearing, and just like the line going in, it has fingers cut in it so that you can adjust the size a little bit with those fingers if necessary. You can also bend them. In this case, you're going to bend them down so that they might parallel that line rather than potentially abrade that line. So just like the other one, bend them so that they have smooth contact if they make any contact with that line, and try to give yourself a little bit of clearance all the way around that oil line. You could even need to shift this hole if that pipe or the tube isn't exactly in the same place as it was on the machine that I measured for this. Seems to be some variation in those things occasionally. But make sure you got some clearance. Later on you can tighten up the space around this with a little of that tape if we wish to. The next piece I would put on would be the rest of the turbo wrap. It's this piece that goes all the way around. And so you got it shown here is this piece, this piece, this piece, but it's all one chunk that wraps around here. It has a flange up in front that bends out or up. The rest of these bends all bend this way around to fit around that enclosure, and you can test fit that. You can bend it ahead of time or whatever and then test fit it. It should wrap around there without a lot of difficulty, and once you start putting screws in, it'll pull up in place pretty well. Again, this one has the let's roll it to the bottom. This one has the remainder of that cutout for the oil line to come through this space. Has fingers there so you can bend them open in order to enlarge that hole if necessary, and also make those portion of those fingers parallel to the oil line so that it has smooth contact. And then there are screw holes to screw it to the flanges all the way around, and screw holes to attach it to the previous piece here. So you can come around with the screws all the way around up to the top and nail it down to those flanges and eventually down to the top of the manifold cover here. Okay, after that, the only thing we have left to cover up is the exhaust pipe, and that's done with 4 additional parts. This blue one underneath here is 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4.5 sides or whatever of an octagon. And you bend it into that octagon-like shape. The little narrow flange that doesn't have room for screws in it here is the one that will go right on the bottom of the exhaust turbine box here, and then the other flanges will butt up against the face of the manifold or the exhaust turbine cover, and there are screw holes there to attach it all the way around here. It also has 3 flanges at this end. That one. Let's see if I can hit them all. It can't. There they are. There are 3 flanges on the end of this that will bend up, I think up, to get inside of a support bracket that sticks up here and holds the exhaust pipe rigidly in place. And so you bend those up, and this piece will slide up from the bottom and keep those. I think those flanges are going to go inside of that bracket piece. I've got them bent a little bit here, but you can bend them more if necessary. You can also trim them if you have to, but the idea is to be able to have some flexibility in pushing them up against that support to kind of seal it or reduce the gap around that support. Let's see. Here we go. With that that bottom piece in place, you can bend the top part of the exhaust pipe cover here again into this octagon shape. Notice this one has, the way it's oriented, it's tapers down here at this end, and then these flanges bend out 90 degrees at this end. And it is also a fraction of an octagon. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 faces probably of the octagon. Overlaps the piece underneath, and we'll screw on to the housing here. You can also match up this curved cutout on this flange to match up with the air entry hole in the side of the exhaust turbine cover. So one thing that I forgot to do, I can see in the model now when I look at it here, is this. There's an underlying flange here, then an overlapping one from those two pieces. And normally I would have like 3 screw holes along here to latch those tightly together. Now there's a screw back here that ties them together, maybe even 2 that link them together, and then they're both screwed to the side face of the turbine cover here. But it still wouldn't hurt to shoot a screw or 2 through this wall. I'll probably change that in the design for future runs of this tin, but if you've got one already, you may want to punch a hole, or you just, once this is on, you can actually shoot screws through it because they're self-drilling and tapping screws. Similarly, on the back side of it, this flange probably should, up here, you can see where it overlaps, and I would put a screw or 2 in here if possible, just to make it a rigid, tight enclosure. Once those 2 pieces are on, then we can put on this, let's see, it looks like the blue one here would be the next one. That will overlap the top part here and the sides of this piece. It has 3 flanges that bend and 2 side ears that do not bend. These don't have to bend here and on this side, but these 3 flanges will bend up or out a little bit. The center one probably is about 40 degrees, and the others are a little less than that, and then they'll kind of line up with this other tube, and there should be holes here, screw holes to put screws through and latch it together. Once you have those in their place, you can also shoot screws through here, these 2. Leave the bottom one and we'll overlap the bottom piece later. Again, on 1 screw, here's a way to tell the front from the back. The back has 1 screw here, 1 screw hole here. This one has 2 up here in front. Once that one's screwed on, we can put the last piece on. The last piece is this light gray one. It has a bunch of cuts and flanges in it. This one wraps underneath here. This one wraps underneath here. And you may have to bend these out to the side and then kind of flip them underneath, because there is going to be this piece of steel that comes up. Let's view it from that perspective. That's going to come up here and shoot up into this space to support the exhaust pipe. It's welded to the exhaust pipe. So these flanges on the side will kind of wrap around and hopefully go behind that support piece of steel. The other flanges, this one and the one on the other side, you can bend in or out as necessary to fill that space as much as possible, but clear the support piece that comes up through there. You can make contact with it. It certainly doesn't hurt, but you may have to, these are now adjustable to try to fill that space as much as possible around that support. We're going to lose some air around here that's coming down the pipe through those holes that were in the back here, and let's see if we can see any of those. There you can see a couple of the holes back in there where air comes through the side wall around the exhaust turbine and then can funnel into this space and come up along the exhaust pipe. We're going to lose some of that air in the gaps around here, but if you can bend these flanges in place, it will force the last bit of air to flow up along the last part of the exhaust pipe and come out here where it meets the muffler. Here I've bent the bent flanges down into the center here, and there may be room for the actual exhaust pipe to come through there. If not, you just bend it down as far as until it contacts that exhaust pipe. And there's actually a bit of a curved or semicircular cutout here. The muffler actually would kind of have that shape on its side, and so we may be fitting up fairly close to that muffler. You can get as close as you can and use these flanges to kind of space it off of the muffler, or keep it as tight there as possible. Let me see what else. Oh, here's another thing that I didn't think of when I did the video for how to install a tin, or how to assemble a tin on the bench. If we look down in here, you'll notice that both the upper and lower parts of this side cover on the exhaust turbine have holes in to attach to this cover over the manifold. And you can put those on when you assemble the pieces. I'd start with the bottom one and then put screws through here to hold it on, and then eventually the top piece will come down and overlap here, and then there should be holes here also to screw it into that dark gray piece. What I want to point out though is that that gray piece extends inside of this, and that's because I'm using the same pieces back here from the earlier or the later tin design for the later models. And so on this one, this sidewall moves to the right here from where the previous one's attached. There's actually, or you can see there's holes back in here in that tin that will be unused in your kit here, because we're moving this sidewall around the exhaust turbine to the right. And there will be holes in the flanges here, but because I'm not sending you a new side cover for your manifold, there may not be holes where you want this to go. I mean, there won't necessarily be holes in this flange and this cover to match to these, and so you may need to put this piece in place, mark it, and then punch or drill holes in this for those screws to be able to get in there. I'm sorry that I don't have, but I don't want to ship a whole new kit if possible. In fact, no, I don't believe that there's going to be none of these holes in the back pieces are going to be there when you get when you get these patch pieces of tin. So you may need to, for instance, connect this gray wrap to the side plate here, use that to know exactly where this lands on this side of the manifold cover, mark those, and then put screws in there, and then finish the assembly. Similarly, the one down below, this bottom side cover piece on the exhaust turbine, has holes in it, but there won't necessarily be holes in there. In this one, let's see if I can see it from the other side. Here you can see, these pieces are farther over here to the left, and there are no holes in here for those screws to come through. That's where they should be. Right there, you can see where there should be one there and there, but they won't be there, I don't believe. Similarly, there will not be small pilot holes underneath these in this piece that comes over the top and comes down on top. But once it's in place, once it's tied to the left side over here, left side cover, you'll know where those holes are going to be, and you could actually shoot screws through this manifold cover in order to get that held down tight, and you can shoot one through this little flange here as well. So just be forewarned, if down the road I may add these holes to the side pieces so that when I'm cutting tin parts for either 8010 or 8120, it has the holes in there whether you need them or not. But right now you've got tin that was designed for a different model for the manifold covers, and so there won't be that set of vertical holes in that piece, but you can put them there. Let's see, am I missing anything else? This system also has the air entry hole on the side of the turbo exhaust turbine cover. Normally I would put it on the top, but then we're usually a little bit lower back here. We had to extend this up higher to get over the wastegate actuator, and so it's just easier to come in from the side. Our air is going to enter from down underneath the muffler anyway. We're going to come back here and make a turn under the muffler and come in here to the side. That connection is done with a little HVAC stub entry fitting that has fingers you can push inside and bend out to lock it on, and then I'd shoot a couple screws through a couple of fingers that you apply to the outside. And then you may want to use what I call a flex 90 or a swivel 90. It's a galvanized HVAC fitting that can go anywhere from straight to 90 degrees depending on how you swivel the different rings in it. And that could go onto that stub entry, and it can allow you to shift the hole up or down or in or out as you need in order to line up well to come underneath here. Then you're going to need to switch transition perhaps to the aluminum tube. That may require a little bit of custom work in this case of this. If I had them on hand, I would send you a straight rubber coupling that would go onto the aluminum on one end and onto the galvanized fitting on the other. I don't have any of those around, or you could do it that way. If you have an extra rubber fitting, you could even cut a little bit of the straight section off at each end of that and use that straight section as a coupling to join the galvanized HVAC fitting to the aluminum tube that we send along with the kit. Otherwise, you could also slit the galvanized fitting a little ways back and force it over the top of the aluminum tube and then screw it on and then tape over that connection with some of that galvanized tape. But that may require a little bit of creativity on your part because of the we're doing this patch in a hurry on these. Okay, that's the tin set for the early model 8010 when they still used a wastegate actuator on the turbocharger. Let's see, I think that's up through, it might go through the Model 6 here. So I'm not sure whether 6 has the wastegate turbo or not, but I think by the time they got to 2007, they were switching to the newer turbocharger and moved it out a little bit and took the wastegate actuator off of it. And then it wasn't another year or so after that, and they switched from the 8010 to the 8120. And then in the Model 11 year of the 8120, then they changed the exhaust system quite a bit, so that has a different tin kit design as well. Anyway, that's how this is the view of the tin from the CAD side for that for the Firestop kit for an 8010. If you have questions or have trouble, you can call me. My number is 605-651-0012. If you have issues with it, you can call me and we can talk you through them. But if you watch this and the tin bench assembly and you probably understand this tin kit pretty well by the time you get done with that. I will not do a complete installation video on a machine for the early 8010. The process is explained pretty well here, and it is very, very, very similar to the 8010, 8120 video that shows how to install that. It's just a little bit different box around the turbo, and we've shown what those differences are in this case. So I hope that helps you. Be sure and have a safe harvest. Thank you very much.